Hello, everyone. All right. So I think before I even introduce my two speakers that are sitting left and right of me, let me tell you a little bit something about the genesis of the topic of this discussion. We're going to talk about the ultimate question: do VCs that haven't founded their own startups before, do they suck? Are they really bad at what they do as VCs? And the reason we came up with this topic for discussion is because Tech in Asia recently introduced a new section called Talk. It's a part where our readers can contribute opinions, questions, links, and yeah, they spark discussions like these that sort of look more, at the gossip side or perhaps more personal aspects of the startup ecosystem and the people in it. And this question was on someone's mind, a user called Unpopular Puffin. And a discussion spun out from there. A couple of people commented, including other founders and VCs. I think, Saemin, you commented also on that thread, right?
I said I sucked, so I just...
Anyway, so we decided to spin out this topic into a talk here at the conference. And we decided to bring in two VCs who sort of represent two sides of that discussion. Kylie here has been a founder. He doesn't suck. He's a good VC.
Hope so.
Saemin has not been a founder. He spent time at Google as strategic partnership development partner, and he's now at Rakuten Ventures. Saemin, I guess you suck, not having been a founder. So we're going to spin this question around and kind of look at it from all sides. And I'm going to, since there's no founder here on stage with us, I'm going to take the perspective of the founder, and I'm going to try and bring in the issues raised by the community members in that discussion thread. All right. Let's get started by saying a little bit more about you, Kylie. I think most people know who you are, but maybe tell us a bit about 500 startups and the startups currently in your portfolio.
Yeah, okay, so I'm a VC, kind of, and 500 Startups is a seed stage investor. We're the most active seed stage investor in the world right now. We've done 1,000 companies in 50 countries. In Southeast Asia, we've got a fund called 500 Durians that focuses on Southeast Asia. We've done about 50 companies here, including Grab Taxi, iMoney, Carousel, a few others. And we frequently co-invest with a lot of other VCs, and we get a chance to see the dynamics between different VCs, what strengths they add to the team, what strengths they add to the founder. We have a lot of back channel through our founders and who are more useful VCs in different contexts. And over the past 2 years of doing this, I started to earn a lot of respect for a lot of the VCs that I work with. And I start to see a lot of the nuances between how founders interact with VCs and how they actually deal with their own investors on the board and stuff. So I think that this topic is a really multifaceted one. And to me, it's not about whether a VC has a background in whatever. It's whether or not there's a good VC or a bad VC, a sucky VC or not. And secondly, what's very important is that founders need to be aware of what they lack, and they need to assemble teams of people to complement what they want to achieve. And that includes investors as well. They need to assemble the right team of investors, the right mix of different brains to get the job done. So, and this may include all kinds of VCs, not necessarily from a founder background.
Yeah, I think definitely we're gonna be picking up on those topics. Do you want to tell us real quick some of the companies that you're currently working with?
As in the startups in my portfolio?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mentioned like maybe some of the more famous ones are like Grab Taxi and iMoney. And Carousel, which Saemin led the round, or the first and the second round, right? Some others you can pick in any country. Let's say Philippines, we've got ZipMatch, and let's say in Thailand we have ClaimD, we have Omise, we've got Blissby. You know, we got a whole bunch, right? There's 50 of them. But specifically, what I would say is that what I think is important to this topic is that founders also need different investors at different stage of the company. So in the earlier seed stages, kind of like angel stages of the company, if you will, they need a different kind of help. Then when they're at Series C or D, they need a very different kind of help. So there's also the nuance of which founder across which stage, right? So
yeah, for sure. Saemin, do you want to say briefly something about Rakuten Ventures and the startups you have at the moment in your portfolio?
Yeah, sure. Rakuten Ventures started up maybe about 2 years ago. We started out as a Southeast Asia-focused strategic investment fund. We were a true blue corporate venture capital fund. And then once we started investing, we saw the really great upsides of being able to tap into the ecosystem, work with great founders, and then later on look at even financial upside for the future. And then we kind of transferred that into a $100 million venture capital fund for a seed to Series A stack investment. After that, we've had about 8, 9 investments, ranging from Singapore, where we invested in Carousel, Pocket Math, and then we invested in companies like Algorithmia, which is an algorithmic marketplace in the US. And our focus has been to be able to match the speed and the overall interaction dynamic that commercial venture capitalists have with founders, because we see that as a very valuable segment of the marketplace.
Right on. So I think Kylie has already touched upon a couple of the deeper lying questions that are connected to this topic. I mean, obviously we can't answer the question this community member asked, but we can discuss what makes a good VC, what are some of the ways maybe a VC can bring in different experiences if he's not been a founder or if she's not been a founder. But maybe to start off, I can actually go back to that original post in our talk section by the community member and just read some segments out for you because I think it's important to sort of have a feel for those emotions and the thoughts that a founder may have in those situations when this frustration with the VC comes up. So this user says, many investors don't have experience as founders, and speaking to them is painful because they don't seem to get it. We have the bravery to start something while you just sit around and call the shots. If you don't have experience as a founder, don't dictate founders' product strategy. You might kill the business. The best way to help a founder is to trust and support them. Feedback is okay, but let them know that it's your opinion as a user and not as an experienced entrepreneur. So this user seems to really be having some sort of frustration, a miscommunication with his or her VC. I'm not even sure if it's a woman or a guy. So I mean, when you read something or hear something like that, does that sting? Like, do you feel as a non-founder VC, does that touch you in any way?
I mean, it's sad to see, but not only in just the perspective of me not being a founder VC, but it's just that in the end, it's about really the founder and investor fit. For some really great VCs, the founders that they're matched up with could be the worst combination in the world, and they in perpetuity could hate each other for the rest of their lives, just because their personality didn't match. They ended up investing a whole lot of money in a valuation they thought that would go quickly up, but it didn't actually, come to fruition. I see this actually more and more these days because you see corporate venture capital arms, really who are used to investing in growth stage investments, coming down to the Series B, Series A stack, and really investing, taking all the overall rights that they would normally take, not being opportunistic, but normally take, and then having a bad interaction with them because, again, the founders are not used to that much control and not being able to define their path that much.
Mm. Kylie, what about you? Were you ever in a similar situation as a founder? Did you feel that frustration? And what do you feel about that now that you're in the VC seat?
Yeah, I actually have a personal experience and I can tell you a story. But before I tell you a story, I'll say that a comment like that, there's a few things that you need to note about a comment like that. First off is that it sounds like that person who was commenting had a bad experience with one VC, and it's kind of like saying that, oh man, my ex-boyfriend sucked, I hate all men. There is that is just the intellectual, honesty behind that, right? So it suggests that, because you have one bad experience with someone, that means all of them are the same. So I think that has to be taken into account. But secondly, like from a personal experience, so back in the day, this was 4 years ago when I first started companies in Malaysia. So at the time, we received we bootstrapped for 2 years before we got a VC to invest in our company. And this was a very well-respected VC who was early investor from Walden into Job Street, and they did a lot of good deals back in the day. Now, so when I first started out working with her, the relationship was very sensitive and frustrating at times because I was building a news organization, says.com. It's kind of like a BuzzFeed. It's a news organization in the social world. Now, she didn't have a Facebook account, so a lot of times I would be kind of like needing to explain a lot of things. And the way monetization worked for me as well was really indirect. And so we would have a lot of debates on product, and I would not necessarily think that she was qualified to tell me what to do about product. And so we'd have like heated arguments around different things. Now, over time, I kind of matured a little bit from that process, right? I started to see that, okay, so she's not going to change much about this. I need to change my attitude. So how can I see what are her strengths, and what can I use her strengths for to help my company? Now, eventually, when I got around to selling the company, like she was immensely useful, right? There's so many things that I needed to think about as far as looking at term sheets are concerned, running a process for an exit of a company. And like, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to sell the company at the amount that I wanted. And I would have gotten myself and accepted a bunch of terms which would kill me later on. And so it completely saved my life. Another thing that she did really well was that she always made sure our finances were really tight. She helped even interview a good finance manager to help us with that part of things. So there's a lot of things she did was really strong. And I said that if I spend my life as a founder looking at my investors' lackings and like just picking on that shit, it's not going to help me. I need to see what the strengths of this person is. I need to work with that. And I think that kind of advice is the same to like relationships with your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, wife, your children, your friends. It's the same thing. We don't walk around the streets just hating on people's weaknesses. We should find to see what's magical about them, what's their gift, and how to make that useful. So there you have it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's definitely a major takeaway that we can't say, yeah, what you said earlier, and one investor may be good at one stage, another may be better at the other. You can also turn that around and say, only because someone's been a founder doesn't mean they're a good advisor in this moment of time, right? Saemin, what do you say to that? I mean, how do you compensate for, Kelly, you mentioned you didn't really take her advice in terms of product. Other things, yes, but because she had never built a product, she didn't really know anything about that process. What about you? How do you compensate for that never having built an actual product?
I mean, for me, I take it very logically in that when I invest in a company and when I invest in the vertical, I make sure I understand that vertical very, very well. And in that perspective, I understand what's going to happen in a macroeconomic sense in the mid to long term. And in that perspective, I can give them a much higher level viewpoint on what they should be doing on product. And a lot of times they agree with me. If I don't understand the company or the product, there is like a 90% chance I will not invest in the company. That's basically it. And that basically means that it's not right for my company, and it's not right for my company, meaning Rakuten Ventures, and they're not right for me. Because once you have the fundamental disagreement upon what good growth is and what good progress is for especially private companies, it becomes a very, very messy like wrestling match, number one, to define the philosophical success metric of a company, and then gear that into the next funding rounds of successive injections.
Well, I think I like that because it's coming from an investor. A lot of different investors know their strength and they know what they're really, really good at and what they can add value in. And so the duty is on the founder to understand whether there's that alignment, right? We're trying to create that alignment.
I mean, look, like when I talk to like Pocket Math, for example, we invested 10 million USD into this company. This company is doing just gangbusters with like 2 or 3 salespeople. But when I talk to them, I talk really geeky ad tech, and they followed me through 0 to 0.10, and they agreed upon everything. So it was a no-brainer for us to invest in the company, and thankfully the company is doing well. The same thing is for Carousel. When I met them, they were asking for a very small sum of money, but I loved their traction so much that we said, what if we gave you $1 million? And everything we talked about in terms of product penetration, market penetration, geographic likeness and whatnot, these things we really agreed upon. So these things really come down to, is it a good founder and investor fit?
Yeah, maybe someone in this discussion thread brought up the idea that maybe what founders in certain stages of the often hard journey of building a company need is not so much advice, but more empathy. And that this particular person who was sort of feeling frustrated with their VC is that they were actually looking for someone who would just kind of sit there and hold their hand and say, oh, this is going to pass, this is just a bad phase. What do you say to that? How important is it to be empathetic towards the founders you're advising or working with?
Well, I think the counter question to that is that, like, can you be completely not empathetic at all and be a functional VC? Like, I think the answer is no. I think to be a decent human being, you need to have a minimum level of empathy with other human beings, and it's no different in startups and VCs.
I mean, definitely, like, it's just that, I mean, I think a lot of the problem stems, especially in Southeast Asia, where you end up having angels and super angels that are from family offices, and they take money much more personally. And I've seen some situations where people get really uncomfortable when a revenue cutback was taken as a product choice because they knew it was right for the user, and then the family office freaks out. And I'm like, why don't you just calm down, right? We'll get back on track in the next 1 or 2 months. And I think that kind of maturation cycle for Southeast Asia will take due time. In due time, it'll work itself out. But I've seen more and more of those interactions where the money is so close to home that kind of people being more critical of the market path is based on the deficits that come from the short term.
And I think to build on that point, I think what becomes a problem for a lot of venture capitalists is that some VCs, their horizon's longer. Like a lot of fund terms are 7 years to 10 years, fund life. You want to give the company enough time for them to mature into a giant unicorn with multiple horns or whatever, right? So, but if a lot of the angels, sometimes their horizon may be shorter. They're investing a lot of their personal money, and they be former founders, and then they put money in, and they want to kind of cash out. Sometimes it works out where the late round VCs can buy up the angels, and then the angels get to cash out a little bit. But again, it's very sensitive for the founder to know because like different investors have different motivations. Some want to go long, some don't want to go long.
I mean, dovetailing on this, you can see if you say that, oh, you know, this founder was an asshole, this founder is so short-sighted, it's also it's a good study to look at who the LPs of those VCs are, because the kind of relationship that a VC has with a founder is sometimes very, very proportionate to the kind of a relationship that they built up with their LPs. Because the LPs will say, okay, we got to exit this out in 3 or 4 years. You're my man, you put the money in, you take responsibility. And that stress really translates into a much more opaque and maybe, you know, discolored relationship with a founder.
So I want to take this discussion, if you don't mind hijacking a little bit, to something very practical for founders. And this is kind of the advice I give, you know, should anyone be foolish enough to take it, is the founders should treat their investors like their employees. You got to sell them the vision, you got to sell them the vision, you got to sell them the vision, make sure they're all aligned to the same vision, and you got to give them homework to do. You got to make sure they're busy. So one point how my relationship with my VC changed was that I realized, okay, she's good at these things. What can I do? I can get her to help investigate this, help her research that, identify this, figure that out. So every board meeting, I left her with some homework to do, right? And then that translated into a healthier relationship because she felt she was delivering value. So she liked the company more, and my relationship got to way healthier levels. And so with today's founders, the one issue they have is that they treat their investors like mentors, and we grew up in a very pedagogical kind of education system where your teacher has this great authority and knows everything. So you're like, oh, dear investor, what should we do? This is our company, this is our board meeting, this is our stats. What should we do, right? That sucks, you know. You're relinquishing control of your company unnecessarily, and you're instilling weaker confidence in your investors in you. So you should be telling your investors, this is the vision, this is where it's headed, this is why it's awesome, this is homework for you, this is how you can help me. I need a new CTO, you find 3 candidates for me, right? Give them some homework to do. So practically, I think that creates a more practical dynamic to improve relationships, whether or not the VC is founder or not founder.
That almost sounds a little bit like parenting. Do you sometimes feel like you're somewhat of a mentor? I mean, even more than a mentor, like a parent to your founders?
Actually, this is an interesting point that Kylie made, because when I look back on my portfolio companies, I've essentially invested in companies that know exactly what they're doing, and I can back off, and they will like very, very regularly ask for support on what I can support them on, business contacts, product feedback, you know, recruiting needs and whatnot. So that relationship from a father to child relationship really has to be realigned to fit, you know, what a partner to partner relationship should be.
Exactly. That's a good metaphor.
Right. Do you, I mean, I have this discussion in my mind so vividly, and they brought up, you know, there in Asia, you know, things are different. We don't really have VCs who treat us as equals. Some VCs here tend to like really keep the asymmetrical relationship. We're the big people with the money and you're the founder who has to perform. Can you relate to that, and you think it is a sort of Asian problem?
I mean, for me, I literally, I say this to my founders is I literally drop the money and run. Because the founders obviously know what they're doing, and I just need to support them and try to support them as much as possible. But again, yes, I have seen a much more asymmetrical relationship where the investors have tried to take much more authority in their ability to actually judge a roadmap and product trajectory. I mean, if you look at, and you see a lot of this actually from PE, it's the private equity sector, the investment banking sector. That tradition is true and true because a lot of the product decisions that they're making are based on very, very solidified quants. You know, what is the OpEx, what is the revenue? Based on this, what kind of facilities can we make? And when they try to transfer that into a habitual, advice-giving session, it rarely works out for startups.
I've also, again, from this discussion, it came up the idea that VCs sometimes may tend to overachieve in terms of giving advice just because they want to appear very active and involved and be good VCs. And so they just can't sit there and say, oh, I really don't know in this case. You know, it's hard to admit that maybe you're not the all-knowing superhuman. Kylie?
Well, the thing about 500 is that our entire fund is built on the thesis that we're like only smart in one or two things in our entire lives, and we're stupid at 999 other things. So we're designed to co-invest. We always co-invest with good VCs. You know, we never lead an entire round by ourselves. And we always try to assemble teams of specialists to go into a round. You know, when we do a travel deal, we look at a few angels who've done big travel companies. We got a few VCs who have done travel companies. We try to assemble really good syndicates. Over time, you know, we think that so far has been a good dynamic if the founder can manage a bunch of investors. I think when you have like many investors in a round, sometimes that creates some complexity, like as we touched on a bit earlier. So we think the best thing a founder can do is to just get really good at managing their own investors.
I completely agree. I mean, even when we did the carousel round 2 years ago, we really, really asked about, okay, like we want to give you $1 million, but outside of that, what kind of people do you need to actually be able to give you the right advice? So that's how we assembled a team, right? We got Kylie to handle Malaysia, we got Danny to handle Indonesia, and they really gave great advice to the founders. And you know, for Rakuten Ventures, we want to make sure that we create a syndicate, but also we want to create a very efficient angel stack. And also we got Darius, and basically they really championed the Carousel's team and giving them good mentorship and good guidance. So that being able to construct that stack is very important for a lot of the VCs going forward, especially the post-Series A guys.
But can you always like sort of tell in advance how it will work out with the founders? Or, I mean, don't you find yourself, has there ever been the case that you find yourself in a situation where it's the other way around, you sit there and think, man, I wish this founder had the experience and know-how that I have sitting here, where they say, you don't know what it's like to be a founder. And what do you do in those situations when you think, this person really needs to pick it up and do some more homework?
Well, I think at the core of it, like I don't like to overthink a lot of relationships. I try to be as authentic and honest and straightforward as I can in every interaction, all the time with anybody. And to me, like that simplifies my life. And number two is that to me help builds honesty with my founders. And my founders tell me shit that, well, we didn't mention this when we were fundraising, but right? So over time, like you just get more and more, like it gets a deeper, more authentic relationship with founders. And they'll tell you things, they'll talk about things, they get your advice on different things. And most founders, if I do my job right, most founders are smart. They know when to come to you for what. So I would say that those horror stories may happen when maybe the founders aren't prepared to get serious about raising money, or maybe they've raised money from some shitty VCs. I'm not saying that there aren't any shitty VCs in the world and it's all the founder's job to pick them. I'm saying they are shitty founders, they are shitty VCs. So hopefully good founders and good VCs get along and build great companies.
Saemin, what about you? Have you had a situation where one of your founders just doesn't pan out the way you thought, and how do you try to fix that?
I mean, like up until now, I've been very lucky to invest in founders who understand where they want to go exactly, and my interactions have been very, very congenial in how we interact. But for me, I guess for me, it's a little bit different in that I take a much more automatic, subservient role to the founders. I say, look, what can I do to help? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Are these things that I can help you on? And I try to earn the respect before I talk about, you know, what can we do on the next board meeting. Because especially with growing companies aggressively, board meetings are sometimes, you know, deleterious in their efforts to actually, you know, create a good, you know, a circle of trust. So for me, it's really like, number one, I like the founder, and number two, let me earn your respect. And number three, let's work on everything else after that.
I think both of you are just really good at what you do. But what, in the case of this person who's obviously having a problem, do you have advice? I mean, I don't know, maybe you're in the audience, unpopular puffin, so listen up. I mean, is there any advice from you guys how to fix a relationship gone bad, where the founder is just, you know, I wish I had never said yes to this deal?
Yeah, well, I think I touched upon some of that. Like, I think the first one is you got to know yourself what you really need to assemble your team of investors and employees to get your company to succeed. You need to know yourself. Number two, you need to get to know your investors as much as you can, right, to assemble the right ones. Then once you get them together, they will almost all not work out as planned. Then you need to manage that set of relationships. And I mentioned earlier, make sure they're aligned and then give them homework to do. I think humility is not a problem for a lot of Southeast Asian founders, actually. You know, I think in maybe Western context that argument is made. But Southeast Asia, I think sometimes a lot of founders are over humble, as I mentioned earlier. So do not relinquish too much power in your own belief in your own voice. So I think those are three things which come to mind that unpopular puffin can do.
I mean, it's one of these things where you just, and this is kind of dovetailing on what Kylie said, is that it's in many ways like a marriage and a relationship, is that you got to be really, you got to find a way to be open with each other. And for some people, being open is very easy, and for some people, it's extremely uncomfortable. And you got to find out what's going on, because, you know, Unpopular Puffin might have wrote this, but the VC who she or he is writing about might not know. They're like, oh yeah, I love my founder, and they're like,
my founder loves me.
And they're on, like, you know, Tech in Asia saying my founder's my ventures of my VC's a fucking idiot, right? So before that even happens, just have a good conversation with him or her, you know. And if it means that you need to really get drunk to really bare your soul in terms of what's happening and what hurt in terms of their feelings or your overall thoughts about the relationship, you really need to work that out, because it's a relationship that you need to work on.
Wow, it's getting really psychological here. Kylie, do you want to add anything?
Well, at the end of the day, like haters gonna hate, you know what I mean? So you gotta shake it off, I guess, right? So on forums, online, you know, out of a portfolio of 1,000 companies, it's gonna be, you know, there's gonna be some interactions which are not completely positive for any VC in this world, even the best damn VC in the world. They're gonna come across, you know, the best damn founders in the world, they're going to come across some kind of like less positive interactions. And we're not optimizing for making everyone in the world happy anyway, although that is a good long-term strategy as well. But, you know, you got to, if you're a founder, you got to build your company, assemble the VCs that you like, that you want on your team, and make sure they're aligned. You know, this just classic stuff.
Again, like, if I'd be a little bit more hard on us VCs, is that if you found a company that you like and you've agreed upon what the path the startup should take to be successful, and both parties have agreed upon this is what we call success, then in many ways it's on the VC to adapt to how the actual founder wants to build out a business and his personalities. I know that's a little bit onerous on the VCs, but the VC should be a little bit more mature enough to adapt to what this young entrepreneur or what this experienced entrepreneur is trying to accomplish, and try to add value to that as much as possible.
Okay, I think that's a nice final word. Yeah, I want to remind everyone and invite everyone to use the talk feature on Tech in Asia. If you have unpopular opinions or things that are in your mind, that's the perfect forum to voice them, and maybe we can pick them up in the next conference and talk about them on stage. Thank you. Thank you, guys.